So Overrated is a rock song. It says alternative, that's a descriptive phrase. But it's rock. Crotchet set at 125 beats per minute. Have a look at the recommended listening. Foo Fighters, you've got I Know Them, I Know. Yeah, have a look at the recommended listening. It is important to listen. 125 beats per minute. Starts with a crash snare and then followed by two basses, all in quavers. 1 and 2, flam, bass, bass, flam, bass, flam, bass. More of the same, except here you got a flam on the mid tom and the floor. So the floor is the big stroke, the mid tom or tom 2 is the flammy stroke. Then it's 1 and rest and 3, 4 and snare floor, snare floor, snare floor, snare floor, bass. And then more of the same. Here it varies a bit, so that stroke here is again the tom 2 and the floor is a flam, so you're hitting those two toms, and I'll show you what that's like in the demo. And then you've got a flam on the floor itself, bass, and then you got the same bar here. Then you got crash bass, so it's 1, 2 and rest and D4 E and A. You got a 6-stroke, kind of 7-stroke if you count the crash, and then it's bass, bass, snare, bass, 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 snare, bass. The crashes are in crotchets, everything else is in quavers. 8 strokes here, 4 crashes there. More of the same, it repeats again, same thing, bass, bass, snare, bass, bass, 4 E and a semi-quaver, 2 lines underneath, bass, bass, snare, bass, more of the same, it is, 1 and rest, flam on tom 1, rest, flam on tom 2, rest is a 4, and Andy is on the floor. Floor, floor, crash, floor, floor, snare. So C is when you're sitting on the floor and riding it out, so to speak. So it's crash, floor, floor, snare, floor, snare, and then floor, floor, snare, bass, bass, and that is pretty much the same except for the crash. So here and here they're the same, and here you got bass, floor, floor, snare, floor, floor, snare, floor, floor, crash. So C, this line you repeat twice because of the dots. So here and here again. Then these two lines are essentially the same except for the crescendo marking. So let's go to this line, crash, floor, and then you got a bass on 1 and 2, 3 and 4. So the bass is driving even more. So it's bass, floor, bass, snare, floor, bass, floor, snare, floor and bass, floor, and then a bass again, and then tom 2 here with that. So it's tom 2 and floor, and then 3 and 4 and snare, floor and bass, all of them, same bar. This bar of course is the same as that, 1 and 2 and 3 and tom 2, floor, floor, with a bass on the 4 E and A, see there, tom 2 and a floor together. Follow the vertical rule. Crash bass, 1 and 2, crash, rest, and 4 E and A. Crash, snare, 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 crash, rest, and D4 E and a, crash, snare, 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 crash, rest, and E4 E and a. So these two bars are the same. So is that 1, 2, 3, 4, they're the same. And then you get into crash, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, and then you develop it. But stick to this for now. In the demo I do a couple of different things. I'm not trying to do anything fancy because I want you to come up with the ideas. So go through this for 8 bars, then you enter section E. And E is very much this line. E is the same as B except you don't do the 4-ianers. So crashes on the quavers, crashes on the crotchets, everything else on the quavers, 4th notes, 8th notes in other words, and then you got bass, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, bass, snare, 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 bass, snare, 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 bass, snare, bass, snare, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare, all the way through. And then you got this kind of thing here, except you can interpret a little bit. You can come up with your own fills where it says fill in those crotchet dashes. 1 and 2, crash, rest, tom tom, floor, 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 crash, da da 2, and whatever you want, crash, da da da, crash, rest, da 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 da, crash, da da 2, crash, ba da 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 da, boom, with a finish there, rest. That's a crotchet rest, that's a minim rest, which is the equivalent of 2 crotchets. And this how it sounds.
Overrated. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.